Hey Clubhouse, Miss Erin here. So yesterday we read chapter 7 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So basically all the first years got sorted into their house. Harry was really nervous about it, but he found out that he was a Gryffindor. So we're going to continue reading chapter 8 today, and this is entitled The Potions Master. There, look. Where? Next to the tall kid with the red hair. Wearing the glasses? Did you see his face? Did you see his scar? Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory the next day. People queuing outside the classroom stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or doubled back to see him pass in corridors again, just staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts. Wide and sweeping ones, narrow, rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. There were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in the exact right spot, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the portraits kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coats of armor could walk. The ghosts didn't help either. It was always a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through a door where you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right direction, but Peeves the poltergeist was worth 2 locked doors and a trick staircase if you met him when you were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from underneath your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up behind you invisible, grab your nose, and screech, "Gotcha, crack!" Even worse than Peeves, if that was possible, was the caretaker, Argus Filch. Ron and Harry managed to get on the wrong side of him their very first morning. Filch found them trying to force their way through a door which unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds corridor on the 3rd floor. He wouldn't believe that they were lost. He was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose and was threatening to lock them in the dungeons where they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing by. Filch owned a cat named Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dust-colored creature with bulging, lamp-like eyes just like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors alone. Break a rule in front of her, just put one toe out of line, and she'd whisk off to find Mr. Filch, who appeared wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the secret passageways of the school better than anyone, well, except for the Weasley twins, and he could pop out as suddenly as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to get Mrs. Norris a good kick. And then, once you had managed to find them, there were the lessons themselves. It was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying the funny words. They had to study the night skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of different stars and movements of the planets. 3 times a week, they went out to the greenhouses behind the castle to study herbology with a little dumpy witch called Professor Sprout, where they learned how to take care of strange plants and fungi, found out what they were used for. Easily the most boring class was History of Magic, which was the only class taught by a ghost. Professor Binns had been very old indeed when he'd fallen asleep in front of the staff room fire and got up the next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Binns droned on and on and on while they scribbled down names and dates and got Emmerich the Evil and Uric the Oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, was a tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. At the start of their first lesson, he took to the register, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think that she wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever, she gave him a talking to the moment they sat down in her first class. "Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts," she said. "Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned." She then changed her desk into a pig and then back again. They were all very impressed and could not wait to get started, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing furniture into animals for a long time. After making a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and started to try to turn it into a needle. By the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone all silver and pointy and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone really had been looking forward to was Defense Against the Dark Arts, but Quirrell's lesson turned out to be a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to ward off a vampire he met in Romania, and was afraid he would be coming back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie, but they weren't sure they believed his story. For one thing, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly how Quirrell fought off the zombie, Quirrell went pink and started to talk about the weather. For another, they had noticed a funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasleys insisted that it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected no matter where he went. Harry was very relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everybody else. Lots of people had come from Muggle families, like him, hadn't had any idea that they were witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down to the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What do we have today?" Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge. "Double potions with Slytherins," said Ron. "Snape's head of the Slytherin house. They say he always favors them. I guess we'll see if it's true." "Wish McGonagall favored us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor house, but it hadn't stopped her from giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then the post arrived. Harry was used to this by now, but it had given him a bit of a shock on the first morning, when he got 100 owls suddenly just streamed into the Great Hall during breakfast, circling the tables until they saw their owners dropping letters and packages on their laps. All right, we will stop there and continue.